If you have trouble understanding the spoken language, you're welcome to turn on the captions at the bottom of the screen. It is wonderful to see some familiar names in the room today. Some of you are present on April 2nd when we launched the Engine Room with over 300 young change makers and have hopefully all already signed up for the Engine Room. So we're grateful for your continued support. And for those who are here for the first time, welcome. The Engine Room for the Future is a digital platform designed to mobilize thousands of young change makers to share ideas and engage with the global system. Last year, we had more than 44,000 young people joining us through the year for the ACG Summit. The Engine Room has four essential components: the action group, the pit stop, the spotlights, and the in-person activations. The UN Foundation Next Generation Fellow leads 5 action groups aligned with the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And on April 8th, we onboarded 51 champions and change makers from across the globe to join the action groups. Through the year, the Engine Room will host pit stops, high-level digital events strategically planned to coincide with the key moments in the UN calendar, like the Engine Room launch on the April 2nd, offering a space for young people to share their ambition, visions, and reflect on opportunities with champions, both within and outside the multilateral system. The Engine Room will also host 5 spotlight sessions like the one today. The sessions are digital events facilitating opportunity focused on intergenerational dialogue, tailored to support the exchange of ideas and perspective from leading experts and change makers. The 5 sessions through the year will mirror human-centered design stages. And finally, the Engine Room will hold several in-person activations on the sideline of the key global moments like ECOSOC Forum last week, the CSO Conclave next month, the Summit of the Future in September, COP29, and in November, and more. This is our launch parade. You see the way all Engine Room components tie together. So whether this session, deep listening, fit in, and what are human-centered design stages that I referred to earlier. The Engine Room, fueled by human-centered design principles, harnessing collective intelligence, creativity, and design the 2100 roadmap. This design approach empowers young people to develop solutions rooted in the real need and experience of young people and young countries by observing, engaging, and iterating ideas to integrate diverse perspectives, fostering intergenerational collaboration, and nurturing an open and inclusive environment for problem solving. The approach encourages action groups to visualize current and future challenges through the eye of young people and young countries, ensuring our action and ideas are not only viable, but also resonate across diverse communities globally. It places young people at the center of everything we do, and it's vital as we explore what we want our shared future to look like by 2100 and how the UN can better address 21st century challenges across complex issues from climate change to economic development. The first step of this process is to empathize, and by exploring the lives of young people and young countries to understand their diverse current, future aspirations, struggles, and need. With that context in place, what do you hope to achieve from this session? Please engage and tell us in the chat box. So to kickstart the conversation on the value of deep listening, building empathy, and how all that come together in achieving the ASDG and building an inclusive future, we begin with a film that was created by WaterAid UK. This film illustrates Martin Kizoko's poem, Water Walk. It has been voiced by a child who attended Terry Doll Junior School in London, and a footage features 11-year-old Lara from a Sorvinario village in Madagascar. Rella is the oldest of 7 siblings and has been collecting water since the age of 4 at least twice a day.
At 1 mile, I wish my day could start like yours. On a gentle walk to school and later to a shopping mall, a party or a local park. At 2 miles, I contemplate what it's like at your place. To turn a tap and see the flow of water for a clean of teeth, a drink, a shower, and a wash of clothes. At 3 miles, I think of you. Perhaps you're in a swimming pool or eating at a restaurant with water bottles on your table. At 4 miles, I asked myself whether you ever given idle thoughts about my trek through scorching heat. To the spring, the riverbank, a muddy hole where I collect the dirty water I must drink. I start the 4 mile journey home. A full container on my back. Sometimes I daydream about other children in other countries far away from here. I wonder what the distance is of their daily water walk.
The first time I saw this film, I really drilled the message home. We live in a world with diverse lived experiences. Until we stop to listen, our understanding of people and their lives will remain incomplete. I'm sure you also have thoughts, feeling as you were hearing Lara's story. We are sharing a Mentimeter link in the chat now. I think Kunalika did it. So please take the next 1 minute to share your immediate reaction having heard Water Walk. I could see some answers coming in. My privilege. That's right. I'm reminded of the different lives young people lead globally and how it's so important to keep listening. That's a good one. Safeguarding concerns. Deeply grateful for my own privilege. Privilege is coming in often. The last line really moved me. We must walk in a way where no one is left behind. It is sad that we never take much time to appreciate how privileged we are. We need to assist where possible. How do we support solutions for increasing access to clean water? Very important to start thinking this way. We must acknowledge our privilege and use it for good. No child should have to do this. Reminded how unacceptable it is that some people do not have access to clean water today's age. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and keep them coming and keep reflecting as we dive into the conversation today. And I welcome out, who is going to take us through the panel discussion.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Awais Ahmed, and I am the Next Generation India Fellow for Innovation. Today, I'm joining you as the moderator for a power-packed panel here. Before calling on our speakers for the day, let me share some context for the panel. So, globally, 50% of young people are under the age of 30, with most of them residing in young countries of Asia and Africa. And by 2100, 50% of all young people will call Africa home. However, 70% of young people residing in countries that spend more on debt than the SDGs, and only 15% on the SDGs are on track to be achieved by 2030. As a result, we have young people that are growing disengaged and disenchanted by a system that feels contrary to their needs. More young people are turning away from democracy. Now, this is an alarming trend and an important one, as 2 billion young voters take stage this year. The top 20 most populous countries are set to hold elections in 2024, making it one of the most important years that will shape national and global agendas in the March to 2030. My country, India, is also having its nationwide elections this year. Voting began on April 19th and will continue till June 1 with results on June 4. India is the most populated country in the world with over half of its population under the age of 30. Unfortunately, young Indians not voting are predicted to be the size of Germany's population. Now, with these statistics, it is clear that young people hold the greatest stake in the future, yet they are not at the center of planning for this future. Yet. Here we want to bridge this gap. To reimagine a world that is able to fulfill 21st century needs, tapping into the leadership of young people and young countries, and reimagining the United Nations. We aspire to reshape the global system to better address current and future problems via intergenerational cooperation. Today, as you hear from our distinguished panel, you will learn about the lived experience of young people, their dreams, and aspirations. So, now moving on to the introductions. Joining us today, we have a very distinguished panel, starting with Henry Dicio. He is the Chief Operating Officer of the United Nations Foundation, former COO for Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, and the White House Deputy Assistant to President Obama. After leaving the White House in 2011, Henry joined Ashoka Innovators for the Public, directing global strategic communications for 7 years. Henry has also held leadership positions at the Harvard Kennedy School and the Minderu Foundation. Henry holds a BA in Political Science from UC Santa Barbara and a Master's in Public Administration from Harvard. Welcome, Henry. Dian Safitri was born in 2002 in North Jakarta in a house located inside a garbage dump destroyed to extend a highway. She discovered her passion for drawing early in life. Despite financial obstacles preventing university education, she pursued design in high school while working to cover her expenses. Support from Life Project for Youth enabled her to become a local youth team communication coordinator. In 2021, she secured a graphic design role in a marketing company, becoming the main breadwinner for her family and a community inspiration at just 22. Recently, she launched her painting business, through which Dian has already sold over 20 pieces. She mentors young women in LP4Y programs, and in 2023, got the opportunity to share her story at the UN headquarters in New York City for the International Day of Eradication of Poverty. She features prominently in the documentary Youth Visions, amplifying the voices of youth facing crises, contributing to advocacy through art. Nico de Klerk is Director for External Relations and Communications at the Ichikowitz Family Foundation, a leading African NGO based in Johannesburg and London. He joined the foundation, which is committed to active citizenship that promotes the preservation of Africa's heritage, the conservation of its environment, and the empowerment of Africa's youth in 2010. This followed a number of senior roles in media, communications, and public relations across government, private sector, and NGOs while based in London. Nico is the project lead for the African Youth Survey, the most comprehensive survey mapping the aspirations, hopes, and challenges of Africa's youth. He lives in Cape Town. Güneş Oguz is a leader and passionate advocate for young people in the European Youth Parliament from Turkey. She serves as the youth board member and a part of the governing body of the European Youth Parliament. an international board of EYP whose members get elected by all members across national branches. Since 1987, the European Youth Parliament has inspired and empowered hundreds of thousands of young people to be open minded, tolerant, and active citizens. Thousands of young people are actively involved as volunteers all over Europe, making the European Youth Parliament a genuinely youth driven program run by young people for young people. She is currently a student of economics at the Bill Kent University and plans to continue her doctoral studies in economics. And finally, we have Sudhanshu Kaushik, who is an MBA Civics Scholar of the University of Chicago, graduate of the University of Oxford and New York University, where he researched young people and electoral politics. He is the founder of Young India Foundation, a trust that works to increase youth political participation that has helped register upwards of 1 million voters and recruited over 50 young candidates to contest elections. Sudhanshu has previously worked with the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations and CNN with Fareed Zakaria. He is the author of The Future Is Ours, where he writes on the youth rights movement in India, and he was also featured on a TED Talk with Shah Rukh Khan on the political future of India's youth. Welcome everyone, we're glad to have you all here. We encourage you everyone here to take an active role in the discussion using the Q&A feature to ask our panelists questions and the chat feature to share your observations, experiences, and any comments that you'll have. Your voice is important and we are here to hear from you. Everyone was great at doing this at the launch, so I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation today as well, especially to those who are a part of the action groups. Remember, this session is here to support you as you design and co-create the roadmap to 2100. So use this space to build on your ideas and expand your horizons. That said, I think we can get started with the first question to Sudhanshu. Sudhanshu, you have traveled across the country speaking to young voters, encouraging them to register to vote. Your organization, Young India Foundation, is also conducting a survey to gauge participation and engagement of the Indian youth with the Lok Sabha elections going on right now. Given this, what do you think are or should be Young India's priorities?
Thank you, Wes. Thank you so much for asking that question. And I am traveling today. Over 130 constituencies in India go to vote, which means lots of young people headed to polls. And we found ourselves in a kind of backwater district of Alipe in Kerala. So I apologize if my audio or my voice is not to the quality that it should be. And I'm currently in a car. Look, I've been going around for about 2.5 years now, trying to register young people to vote, but also understand their issues and concerns. And I think one of the things that I can confidently say is there's no way to say, what are young Indians' priorities / concerns on a broad scale level. As you rightfully said, there are 670 million people below the age of 25. Almost 66% of India's total demographic of whatever the numbers we have, because it's been a long time since we've had the census occur, are below the age of 29. That is twice the demographic of the entire United States. To try to bracket and say that these are the priorities of young people, to generalize that, is something that I don't feel comfortable with, but also it kind of is far from what we're trying to achieve. Of course, you look at it, you see the concerns about obviously what we have all heard of, economic problems, education problems, literacy, illiteracy, and of course, more dire need problems, which I'm seeing right now, is the lack of infrastructure, roads not being built enough, clean drinking water, sewage systems, food to a certain degree. But if you think of it on a larger and broader scale, and this is something I deeply believe in, all of these issues, I believe, stem from a lack of representation. And I think that, to me, is one of the greater priorities of a larger youth. And when I say representation, I'm not saying that everyone wants to become a politician, right? What I do think, and what I think you were also hinting at in your intro remarks, is that this lack of apathy exists for a reason. This lack of engagement in whether it's your not just politics, but let's take it at its basic level, civic engagement. Why are young people not coming out to vote? It's because they have a lack of faith and will at this point. I still think, by the way, that a lot of young people are coming out to vote. We just have way too many young people in India, and they are coming out to vote. But you're right in the fact that when we think about voting, when we think about our politics, when we think about representation, it's just not sexy. As compared to Western nations, whether it's the US, whether it's the EU, I mean, you'll have a Harry Styles stopping a concert in midway and asking people to register to vote. You don't get that in India, right? And even your civic engagement is inferred as partisan and politics, and it just kind of corrupts that basic necessity. But again, I think that one of the biggest realizations that I've had is that young people have this weird dichotomy in India. Because of the demographic and kind of the language access, most people can speak two languages. On top of that, and I'm talking about specifically young people in this case, that you I was muted. I'm so sorry. Can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead. I think there was a little bit of a network issue, but please go ahead.
Okay, so I basically was saying because of the cheap data that we've had access to and the cheap phones, while we might not have like a quality food to eat 3 times a day, young people do have access to the world through their phone and they see what's out there and then what they have in reality, right? So if you kind of look up from your phone, palm of your hand, what is the reality versus what the imagination is and what we're talking about. So that puts you in a very weird dichotomy of sorts of trying to understand what exactly is your fault and what are the reasoning needs and issues to make you and basically elevate you to a larger representation. And I think that, to just sum up, comes from the need of representation. Why, for example, in the work that I've seen, in the data that I'm collecting, while people won't directly say it, right? Because they come in the forms of, the economy, jobs, health, etc., frustration. But then there's a lack of, who's there to really voice our concerns? Who's there to kind of raise our issues? And who's there to relate to us? I mean, India is one of the most thriving gerontocracies. Our average age of a politician is 64 years old. We have right now, since the elections have been announced, 0 member of parliamentarians below the age of 30. We've never had someone below the age of 25. And yet, more than half the country is below the age. So I think I'll stop there. But I think that these priorities are all over the place. But one common theme I found truly is kind of that lack of representation that young people will directly or indirectly kind of voice.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Sudhanshu. We'll come back to you later with some more questions, but moving on to Nico. In 2022, the average age of Africa was 18.8 years of age. Young people are not just the future, but the present reality of Africa. So given this, could you share some of the most significant findings of the African Youth Survey in 2022 conducted by the Ichkovitz Family Foundation?
Yes, thank you very much. It is because of those, the data that you just shared, that we've decided as, excuse me, that we decided to focus on youth in Africa and to really focus on data and information to really understand, what young Africans want. What Africans want, and also to give a voice to Africa's youth. It's such a huge young population, and it is also the only one of the only growing populations on the planet. So when we embarked on this survey, we've done it now 3 times, and actually the 2024 report will be out, in the next month or 2. This time around, we surveyed around 16 African countries. We surveyed 5,500 young people across, sub-Saharan Africa. all face-to-face interviews. It's very important for us to actually walk in the streets, knock on people's doors and have, proper conversation with people, for 30 or 40 minutes to really understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities that they face. And in the three waves of the survey, we have now covered 25 countries across Africa. And we did nearly 15,000 face-to-face interviews with young people across the continent. So we're very excited about the data. I think it's a very useful tool, for organizations, to use in terms of understanding what are the challenges that young Africans face. I think in terms of answering your question, I want to focus on two aspects, of the survey. And one of the things that we ask young people is to tell us, what in their views were the biggest events, in the last 5 years, that affected them. And at number one, and this was in 2020, even before COVID, is death from infectious diseases. So at 45%, that is the top event that young people list as having had the biggest impact in their lives in the last 5 years. So issues like malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, Ebola, all have still today, have an impact on young people's lives, and this is one of the biggest impacts. In terms of COVID, our data from 2022 show that had a huge impact on young people. Nearly 40% of young people say that, they had to stop their schooling. And nearly 20% say that, they lost their job as a result of COVID. So that is a huge impact. The second aspect was political instability, the rise of terrorism, conflict on the continent, that has a huge impact on the development of young people. On a more positive note, in third place is, the technological revolution, digital revolution on the continent, and access to Wi-Fi, social media, the rise of e-commerce. This is obviously very important development on the continent. And then some of the other big challenges are also, environmental challenges, the impact of climate change. We've also asked young people, what do they think really should be done on the continent to push the continent forward? What are the priorities that is needed to make Africa progress in the future? And obviously the one that came out always on top is, creating new and well-paying jobs. This is a constant that is by far the biggest, priority for young people. And that's followed by the reduction in government corruption. It is interesting. We actually right now, in a week's time, we will publish a report, a special report on South Africa, because South Africa is this year celebrating its 30 years of democracy, and also elections at the end of May. And one of the top concerns for young people is the impact of corruption. I mean, corruption is an impediment to start a new business, is the key driver for young people saying they actually want to immigrate. I mean, nearly 50% of young people say they want to immigrate. And one of the key reasons for that is corruption. So that is a big deal that needs to be addressed. The modernization of the education system is the other top priority for young people, achieving peace and stability. And then there's a whole host of others, but yes, making it easier to start a business is a key priority for young people. Providing access to internet. I think what we've seen during COVID particularly is how young people in Africa were penalized because, they don't have access to Wi-Fi and can't continue to work from home. So that is in a nutshell some of the key priorities for young people, how they see what needs to be done to make the continent progress into the future.
Thank you, Nico. Very insightful. I think someone asked a question as well. How can they get access to the data from the survey and what you presented? If you can just help them out with a link or reference as to where they can find it.
We'll share a link. The 2020 to 22 reports are available, so I can send that link. And the new report will be out, as I said, towards end of June, early July. So then we'll share that as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nico. Appreciate your insights. Moving on to Gunesh, the European Union includes a diverse groups of countries. Aspirations of young people in Denmark, for example, may be very different from the aspirations of young people in Spain. Given that, how do you forge a common ground and build consensus at the youth parliament level with young people coming from different experiences, different backgrounds, and different contexts?
Thank you, Luis, for the question. Well, to be able to answer this question, I also want to talk about how our structure works, because different youth organizations work in different ways, and we are an education platform that offers young people a place for their voice to be heard, a place to learn and teach things to their peers. And we operate in almost 40 countries in Council of Europe, even larger than European Union. And when we work with all of these people, we engage more than 25,000 people a year. And all of these people coming together, all of the unique opinions, of course, they are different. Aspirations from someone in Denmark is different from someone in Spain. And this is okay for us. Like, we expect them to be different, and we also value the diversity in both of the opinions, but also the people, their backgrounds, because they also have different ways of expressing or different perspectives on different things. It was mentioned earlier before Suzanne's show about the lack of representation and engagement. This is also very much related to that. We see diversity and inclusion as a key element to enrichment and to have a more healthy discussion. And in our conferences, the participants from all of these countries come together and they get information, they get knowledge about the topics. We also work about the topics that are related to economics, unemployment, education, environment, so many topics. Also topics like inequality within the society. And we discuss these in a broader level, but every single time we discuss things or we try to make a decision, it's a decision that goes through everyone. Everyone needs to agree on something to be able to progress, to be able to move forward. So this approach about having everyone's opinion and valuing their uniqueness in their opinion is something that makes us be able to move forward to that common ground. And our organization works in a way that when we have organizations like these events, we also spend lots of time in team building. So we build a team from strangers coming from different countries, and they work towards a common goal to solve the problems they have at hand. And when they try to solve it together, they work for this one common goal. Although they have different perspectives, they have the same goal, which brings them even closer. So this common goal also establishes some kind of a collaboration and cooperation between these people, and this brings them even together. So we work in such a way, but of course we also offer a place for people to introduce their culture, their history, songs, dances. So we try to give these diverse methods to diverse people to show what they really think and to amplify their voices about every topic, basically. So it's more about coming together, bringing people together, and giving them a place to amplify their voices.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ganesh. Henry, coming to you, you have experience working with young people and change makers in a world that doesn't necessarily consider young people's wisdom and experiences while making key decisions. You know, we've talked about how the age of the folks in power is quite disjointed from the folks that are voting for them. So given this context, how do you think young people should position themselves as leaders and experts, and having their voice heard as the coming years and decades make it more important?
Yeah, thank you, Elias, and thank you. I'm really enjoying this conversation so far. But young people are wired for change. And that is an important asset in a world in which change is increasingly the only constant. And so I would say first, and I'm very humbled by this audience, so I don't want to give advice to this audience, but if I were talking to my two teenage boys, I would say find people who appreciate that asset, that quality in young people today, and run with those people who are willing to go fast. Start there. You'll eventually want to dip into more resistant waters, more turbulent waters, but I would start with people who are willing, who really cultivate a culture that invites young people and invites them as stakeholders. So my my own experience with the Obama campaign, we had a culture that appreciated young people, not as props in an election, not as a constituency, but as stakeholders and as partners. And I would say it wasn't a word then, but but I would say we saw change makers. And if you see change makers, and I think this is for all of us, if you see change makers, how would you build it differently? You know, if you're a teacher and that sees change makers coming into the classroom and not students, how would you build it differently? If you're a CEO, business owner who sees change makers walking through your doors and not customers, how would you build it differently? So there's a whole different design that's involved in creating an environment that is inclusive and taps everyone at their full potential. So that's the first thing. So the second thing was I think I appreciate the qualities. I at the time, and I still do, I look for the qualities of the change maker: innovative mind, service heart, entrepreneurial spirit, collaborative outlook. These are I didn't hire to skills and today I don't hire to skills, I hire to those qualities. But also when you see young people, particularly, I think all of us can do this, but young people have the skills of the change maker, and they show it so easily for all of us. That ability to tear down walls and to bring two or more unlikely sides together around a problem or an opportunity, that's when innovation happens. And we had it in our organizational environment. In the Obama campaign, some people thought we were successful for our use of social media or tech supremacy, but it wasn't our tech savvy that helped us. It was that ability to tear down walls and bring people together. Sometimes technology helped that. MyBarackObama.com was a way to do that, brought people together. Sometimes technology was a result of people coming together. You know, we need an app for that. We come together, we see a problem, we build a tool. But that ability to bring that innovation really is a very human thing. And so leaning into your abilities as a change maker and understanding how to model the actions of a change maker are hugely important. One other thing I just say is it is important to have the skills for today's world, but do you really understand the current strategic landscape today? Do any of us? I mean, we lived in a world that for generations and generations was a 1 liter at a time world, was very siloed and hierarchical. We understood it coming up as in our education system as, you know, going through the education assembly line to get a skill and take that skill inside 4 walls for life. And then as my children were coming into kindergarten, there was a stat that said 65% of job types that those 2 boys will assume don't yet exist. Well, the education assembly line to everyone a vocation doesn't work in an everyone a change maker world. We've had a shift where we put the tools of change at everyone's fingertips. So we're no longer in a 1 liter at a time world, which was linear and faster. We're in an everyone leads in every moment, and everyone a change maker world where change is explosive and omnidirectional. And all of this, tearing down walls, bringing people together, living in this world that's hugely explosive and also interconnected, requires a high degree of empathy. And it requires skills that were not valued in the past. So as we move into this new game, from 1 liter at a time to everyone leading in every moment, everyone a change maker, we should really understand that some of us who are more experienced still see the old game that we're change makers, but we still came up and see what we expect. Some of us coming up today are younger change makers. We're also saddled with the same old playbook that all of us have had. So you're not uniquely equipped for this new game until you see the new game and can write the new playbook for it. And that's where I think the challenge is for all of us, is to be able to see and play in the new game.
Lovely. Thanks for those powerful words, Henry. I think those will inspire a whole lot of change makers here in the audience as well. Coming to Dian, young people are 2 times more likely to live in poverty and 3 times more likely to lose their jobs in today's day and age. These are some structural challenges that prevent young people from reaching their full potential and participating in public life. These are also challenges that you have personally faced and overcome as well. So could you share your journey today to highlight the opportunities that allowed you to overcome these challenges? I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, always, and thank you so much for all the speakers. First, I'm really enjoy the insight from all of like Nicole taking grasp for the voice and Ginny saying to bring people together to amplify the voice, or Henry that highlighting the young people as the change maker. This is echoing my story. So, and also, thanks for having me today. I am Dian Savitri. I'm 22 years old. I am. I want to share the journey of a young woman who turns adversity into the opportunity. Travel from Indonesian slums to the United Nations. And I hail from Kampung Sawah in North Jakarta, Indonesia. I reside with my 6 family member. My parents run small businesses from home and earn barely like $150 a month, just half of minimum wage. And here we don't go over high school and struggle to find a decent job despite dedications. And too often the young people become a porter or scavengers or get scammed because of the fake job. We also contend with the recurrent floods, relocations, critical financial conditions, and many more. And me, personally, I discovered my passion for drawing since very young. I determined, I joined a graphic design high school and work aside to get the necessary laptop. And also my parents, they make sacrifice to support me too. So I proved them they did right by excelling academically and winning competitions. And after high school, for me, university was too expensive and had no job despite many applications. I joined Life Project for Youth, or LP4Y, a professional training for youth from excluded backgrounds. We learn to become a professional while supporting the local communities. I use my graphic skill to develop marketing as the team leader. Here, I have gained more experience, public speaking, knowledge, confidence, relations, and project plans. And I was feeling ready. I worked as a graphic designer for 3 years. I could support my family until the company shut down recently. And looking for a new one, I am running painting and digital illustration business as an artist. And I also use that, my artistic skill, in a youth vision. It's a documentary that raises the voice of the young people living in the front lines of the world crisis. I advocate as the main character from Indonesia. In this project, I do also content creation for the social media and draw the animation part of the movie. And I also actively advocate for vulnerable youth. I was a speaker at the United Nations in New York City last year. I am very proud and confident because I'm not from a lucky background, but I could make it with my skills and intuitions. What brings my determinations? So advocacy, it's always should always go together with the concrete actions and mutual empowerment. I'm a leader from LP4Y alumni communities. I organize seminar to develop youth connections and public speaking skill, to gain confidence and to find a job. I work on launching more NGOs collaborations to educate on the climate change also. And to conclude all of that, I have advices based on my story. So first, get support. You need to help you reach your first ever milestone. And have a plan, then you can write it down. And the third is to speak yourself, to empower those around you, because of course you can also be the star, so you can light up anyone in your orbit. So I think that's all for me. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you, Dian. I think, very inspiring story for all of us, and, will inspire, I think, most folks here listening to keep moving despite all odds. So thank you for sharing. This last question is for all the panelists, right? So we'll go in order, but to sort of put forth the question, Young people have demonstrated remarkable potential in leading action on the SDGs over the last few years and decade. How can we harness this momentum better to expedite the SDG implementation and have the most amount of impact we can have on the future, right? So specifically, how can investments in youth be strategically directed in planning for 2030 and post 2030 initiatives with regards to the SDGs? So let's start with Henry, and then we'll go to the rest in terms of how can we harness this momentum we have to expedite SDGs, and what investments can be strategically directed to ensure that we can get there.
Thank you. I'll keep this relatively short because I really want to hear from the others on this, but I think it's really important to invest in people to make change in their place. And there's two reasons why that's an important investment. One is, if you can learn to change your world, then you will learn to change the world. So becoming practiced at change making where you are is hugely important. So to the extent we can build communities of change makers, tackling the complex issues of the world where we are, I think that's going to be hugely important. Secondly, we're going to have to prepare a generation to be changemaker ready. And so that's going to require rethinking rethinking the growing up years. And in my experience, in everything we do, we should be mindful of a framework that really includes 4 key elements. Mastering empathy in your very earliest years, 0 to 7. And we have to model that for younger people, for the younger people in our lives. Then, similar to Diane, we have to learn around our passion. In those years, particularly between 7 and 12, that's an important time to learn around your passion. You can learn so much. And often your passion, those are the years that the adults in our lives sometimes stomp on those passions. Oh, you don't want that passion, you want this passion. So we have to really give young people the freedom to learn and be who they are, in that moment. And then putting an idea around, a team around your idea in your teens, and learning how to tear down walls and bring people together around problems and opportunities, and then learning to be practiced at that. And then the last thing is leaving to learn throughout life. Even if it's just your zip code, the ability to get out of your environment and be exposed to other people and other places and other perspectives, hugely important in the development of the change maker. If we can build that new startup of youth, bake it into our global system, I think it's going to be hugely important for us in tackling the SDGs in the future.
Lovely. Thank you, Henry. Sudhanshu, over to you.
Thank you so much. And kind of going off of Henry, instead of kind of saying what I believe, I just want to leave you with a story. Our first candidate that Young India Foundation actually helped run for political office was a young man named Jagveer Kumar. He comes from the village of Pai in Haryana, which is pretty rural as it is, and he comes from a Dalit background. But in basically 2017, had the political conviction to run for office. We were, I suppose, at the right place at the right time, and were able to play a small role in his success from a non-reserved seat. So for just context, in India, you have specific reserved seats for either now in 2029, but also in the local level has always been for women and also for people coming from a Dalit background. And first of all, winning in a non-reserved seat is a huge, huge deal. This man was able to do so at the age of 21 and became a sarpanch of Pai. And what he did wasn't necessarily monumental, but these small acts of progression, which no other sarpanch had done before. No one was as young as him either. But these 3 things: 1, he was able to bring Wi-Fi through an innovative way to the village in itself. And what we saw that ended up doing is the free Wi-Fi before, Jio kind of took over also, is that people were coming in to the center of the village, the Panchayat house in Bhavan, to access that free internet. And for the first time, this village is very, very segregated caste-wise. And yet these young people were coming around in this village from different castes, different communities, sure, by the lure of free Wi-Fi, but you were seeing conversations take place. Those conversations then eventually ended up for the village being able to implement this huge ancestral crisis that had happened, which had prevented sewage lines to be laid down in the village. And this young generation, led by Jagbir Kumar, was able to actually, for the first time in Pai Haryana, lay down sewage pipelines. So half the village got access to sewage systems, and they wouldn't have to, it come out of their back or front home, etc. And the third, because of the sewage system that was laid in, they were able to get free access to water. And among little things, particularly applying health and sanitation, for the first time having a women's clinic within the village. And I say these things because the Sarpanch at the age of 21 was able to do so. Now, if you scope out and kind of zoom out, I mean, those are 4 of the SDG goals applied right there. And sure, it didn't fix the SDG crisis within that, but within that village, you got a little bit closer. You had access to water. You kind of like your sewage lines piped up. You had access to health. Women, specifically young women, had access to health clinic. So I think I'm so inspired by that story, and I love sharing that, especially when it comes to the conversations with SDGs. We didn't look at it from the perspective of SDGs, but as we zoomed out and saw the success of the village and the development, we realized what this young Sarpanch, this young leader, was doing. So I think that I genuinely believe that if we give young people that representation and that voice, we will come closer to fulfilling that SDG goals. I think this generation can do so because it matters to them. But I'll stop there.
Lovely. Thanks, Sudhanshu. Powerful stories going all around. From moving on to Dian here, right? So how do you think, Dian, we can use this momentum young people have created to, speeden up and accelerate the SDG implementation, and what investments do you think we can be doing there? You're on mute.
Okay, maybe from my side, my perspective, my humble advice for the UN, maybe to make it more easier to understand, because just like MaxGPT did for me, and because better we understand, better we commit. And then the second message is to the grassroots organizations, because you are the one who connected to the excluded communities. You must support engagement. For example, like Life Project for Youth did, is providing the SDGs training to empower youth, who then lead the communities project, and everyone should support you financially. And then the next one is for the company. You should invest in us, because so you have to focus on our skill and motivations rather than our backgrounds and diploma. And also open door to the youth, like company we visit during the Life Project for Youth program, who explain us about the corporate world and give us not only internship but job after that, because the dozen job can change everything, of course. And then for the institutions, we don't have money, but we have ideas and ambitions. We know our communities, and we can tell you what can work. And you must listen to us if you want to succeed with this. This is why today we challenge that all the country delegations should include youth like us in their future UN event. Lastly, I encourage everyone to support initiative like Youth Vision Movie Project. It's raises awareness and break cliche about the youth and poverty, and also inspire action on SDGs. Because we know that art is a powerful tool to engage everything. So if you want to check that out online, you can join us on the premiere in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dian. Nico, over to you for your thoughts as well.
Looking at what the data tells from the youth survey, we have found that many young Africans are highly entrepreneurial, and many of them feel that they can shape their own destiny. That they're not waiting for government to come and solve the problems. A lot of them are taking action. For instance, around climate change, we have found that high levels of young people, over 60%, are already doing things in their own communities, to address their carbon footprints. Again, more than 60% young people say they're actually involved in in environmental projects, in their local communities. So they are getting involved, and they're actually taking action. When I saw the video earlier at the beginning about water, I thought, I do need to highlight some of these findings here, which shows that, 34% of young Africans struggle to get access to clean water. But even more worrying is that 35% of young people say that, they spend up to a quarter of their income on buying clean water. So that is devastating to see how much income goes just to buying the basics. Then in terms of previous speakers also talked a lot about Wi-Fi, the impact of Wi-Fi, and young people across the continent say Wi-Fi should be a basic human right. Access to Wi-Fi is so critical, and we know that on the African continent, access to data is very expensive. Buying data is very expensive, and from the young people that we've surveyed, only about 25% of young people don't actually have any money to actually buy data at any time. Only about 13% say that they have access to data constantly. So these are the areas where investments can make a huge difference in terms of giving young people access to Wi-Fi, access to data, or just to get the price levels on par with what people are paying in Europe and in the rest of the developed world. In terms of the entrepreneurial spirit, again, this is where investments can make a really big difference. A large percentage of young people, nearly 80%, say that they would like to start a business, in the next 5 years. But what are those barriers, to actually do that? And access to capital is obviously one of the key barriers. Corruption is a barrier. Red tape, government regulation is one of the and lack of training and education is one of the key aspects that prevent young people from starting their own business. But we have this huge amount of young people that say, yes, I want to shape my own future. Yes, I want to start my own business, but I need a bit of help. And this is where the investment, can really make a difference. Access to Wi-Fi. Just think if, young people don't have to spend a quarter of their income on buying water, and they can use that rather to buy data, what kind of difference that can be in their daily lives. So these are just a couple of things I thought would be interesting to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Nico. Finally, Gunesh, what are your thoughts around the SDG acceleration through the youth and investments there?
Mm-hmm. So far, all of the speakers mentioned very valuable things, so thank you for all of them. And I remember Henry talking about change makers and being able to see and play the new game. So true, youth also has this ability to see the new game and to play it, let's say, more efficiently. But they also need to gain these skills along the way. And to gain these skills, there are lots of organizations, youth organizations, but also educational organizations that, sorry for the noise if you hear that, but there are lots of organizations that help you gain these skills somehow. These skills can be about communication, or can be about leading, or having an influence in your local or a larger surrounding, or it can be about how to raise awareness about things, because these things you don't get to hear about them at our schools or learn about them at schools, but these are also very important topics that we need to know about. And there are lots of also events and organizations that we are also contributing and trying to organize to raise awareness about topics that specifically target SDG goals and aims. So what I want to say, sorry, the chat distracted me. What I want to say was that young people being able to come together and discuss these topics increases their interest in these. And they also try to come together and say, okay, this is important to me, and what can I do about it? I can go and vote about it. I can be an active citizen within my community and do something about it. Or I can also raise awareness through different media projects. We also try to use media more actively than other generations to be able to drive this change. And we might not have a lot of capital, as other speakers said, but just like Diane said, we have ideas and ambitions, and towards these ambitions, we also have the energy and dedication to work for. So once we realize how important some of the topics are, we can also dedicate our energy towards them and bring change towards future. This can also be through contacting policymakers, not just raising awareness for the network, for the whole world, but also for the policy-driven change can also be made through youth.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Gunesh. We've had a significant flurry of questions from the audience, right? So we'll start to pick some of them and address and hand that over to some panelists. So let's start with the question from Maureen, who is a change maker from our Prosperity Action Group, to Sudhanshu. Sudhanshu, looking at how the political sector is structured in India, where, as you mentioned earlier in the call, where most politicians are elderly, what do you think we can do to make sure that going forward, the political sector is more inclusive with more young people and that the voices are heard? How can we bring that median age down? What are your thoughts?
So there's an issue that I'm actually working on, exactly that. And I might be biased and I might be wrong, but we believe to bring down that average age, you need more younger people. How are you supposed to have more younger people when there is one of the strictest age restrictions on the place of, India's youth? What I mean by that is the age of candidacy is 25 in India. Compare that to the age of candidacies across the European world, Asian continent, even the United States for a lot of their state senatorships, etc., and representatives. The age dwindles from 18 to 21. And so what I believe is that if you have a legal noose around your neck, how are you supposed to actually be able to kind of contest elections and take part in India's democracy? So while it might not fix every single issue that comes under ageism and kind of have substantially more youth participation, that is one way to be able to kind of target that age demographic that is evidently 3 times more than the average age of an Indian right now, and bringing that age down. So that's one way. The second way, obviously, is we have to make our political parties more inclusive. And I think the onus comes back to us, though, is because unfortunately, we have not a large youth bank that's coming out to vote. As OS previously stated, around, I would estimate, and what the Center for Youth Policy has estimated, that there's about 300 million, 30 crore people between the ages of 18 and 30 who could be voting. How many of them actually come out? That's, we don't have data. The Election Commission doesn't come out, but it's estimated that it isn't as high. What's the incentive of a political party to cater to young people if young people are not coming out to vote? So I think the onus goes back and forth. We have to make politics more relatable, and that's the onus on the political parties, etc. But then we have to give incentive to political parties that it makes sense. Maybe Henry can speak to this more or so, but Barack Obama's campaign brought out the largest youth vote possible. And I don't know if Biden's 2020 campaign beat that or not. But he gave them an onus. He gave them reaching out, obviously through different forms, but an aspect of hope, and comparatively younger president as well. So I think that we have to give that by making sure that we're coming out to also vote and incentivizing the political parties.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Sudhanshu. Harriet in the chat had a question to Nico. She shared there that she's been doing an obstetric survey report, which has been silently facing some political resistance because of the kinds of findings that it has. Do you have any advice on how to deal with this? Additionally, how do you deal with politicians who own your data, and any experience you can help on that front? You're on mute, Nico.
Sorry, that's a very good question. Yes, I mean, it is certainly from our perspective, some practicalities of doing the survey, especially you have, people walking around towns and cities, asking questions about, government performance, so So sometimes you have to be careful. Some countries is more difficult than in other countries, but in many ways, so far, it has been pretty straightforward for us. I mean, we have been able to do surveys in countries with many challenges and where there are conflict. We've surveyed people in Sudan, in Chad recently, Niger, etc. So I get you coming from. It is difficult. I think the important thing is to try and convince people that that you're doing a very scientific and independent research, and that the data will be used not as a tool to beat the government, but as a tool to support and amplify government programs, and to provide some further insights as to how they can actually use your data to actually for the positive. But our data has shown that for instance around fake news, that a lot of young people feel that fake news is deliberately being spread by politicians, by governments, to further certain causes. So yes, I mean, and some of the data also show that in many ways, government is sometimes to be blamed for for a lot of misinformation. So it is important, I think, to try to keep that independence, and to say that the data is there for good. I mean, the data information is king, and that can really help, and to be to the benefit of politicians and governments, rather than to see it as a threat.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Nico. Henry, coming to you, we saw you actively responding to a lot of young people's questions in the Q&A, so thank you for that. So we also wanted to highlight that today's session is specifically on deep listening, right? It builds on step one of a human-centered design approach, that is to empathize, and you mentioned that word a couple of times in your answers. Would you consider empathy a key factor in building a thriving intergenerational dialogue? And if so, from your vast wealth of experience, could you share an example maybe of where you've seen it work very potently?
Oh gosh. Okay, thank you for that. Well, and I also just want to quickly touch on this question about politicians stealing your ideas. I would love it if more politicians stole my ideas and made them their own. I think it would be a much better world. And honestly, though, I mean, I think also don't worry about your ideas. Your idea today is not going to be your last best idea. So I'm pretty free about putting. I used to be very protective about should I say this now, or am I going to give it away? But really, I'm more about idea spread now than I am about building my own sort of domain around a particular idea. So I think you can relax about that and get practiced at getting ideas and giving them out. I think that's okay. Secondly, I think this idea of empathy is, well, this probably plays into the same notion. I think it takes a high degree of empathy to put yourself out there and to foster conversation. I learn empathy best. I say that the best years are 0 to 7 to learn it. It's also the best. Those are the best years to model it and also learn. So my best example was when I was going to go to New York City to meet Seth Godin, the famous author, and we were going to have lunch. And I remember as I was packing to go to New York. I live in Washington D.C. My oldest son, Dante, he said he was 5. And he said, "Dad, where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to meet this guy, Seth Godin. He makes me I'm very nervous to see him." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because I think I'm shy." And Dante asked me he couldn't understand what the word shy meant. And so we talked about it, and he looked at his little feet that were just kind of at the edge of the couch. They just went to the edge of the couch. He looked down, he said, "Dad, I think I'm shy." And I said, "Well, what can we do about that?" And Dante gave me 3 strategies. He said, "Dad, I have 3 ideas for you." This was him speaking. 3 at 5. Ask him his favorite tall building. I'm writing notes into my phone. Ask him his favorite food, which is good. So we're going to New York, tall building, going to lunch, food. I said, "Wow, this is great. What's your 3rd question?" Dante said, ask him how he's doing. Which was fascinating because he wanted me also engaged lightly in this stranger before I actually asked him the real question, which is how you're doing. The insights you can learn from a young person, but in the end, we talked about why being shy might not be an advantage in today's world. And together we talked through, and today Dante is not shy. But this idea, when I met Seth Godin, I sat at the table and I said, wait, don't get up. I have 3 questions for you. He said, oh, okay, what's going on? I said, well, what's your favorite tall building? And he stumbled through it. What's your favorite food? He stumbled through that. And then, how are you doing? He said, okay, what's going on here? And I explained this experience with my son, and this notion of building a bonding moment around empathy and what I learned from my son. And by the way, Seth, who has the largest universe of subscribers to his individual blog, the next day wrote a piece called A Sea of Strangers. And it was about this whole topic. And he said, the extroverted person or the externally interested person is not different from the introverted person. They just choose to make the generous choice. So between those 2 conversations and the empathy that was going around and the empathy that went out into the world, I thought was has stuck with me for a very long time. And I'm glad. Thanks for letting me share that story right now.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Henry. I think we would love to keep going on the questions, but sadly, I think we're at the end of time here. I think if I were to just summarize it in a sentence or 2, right? I mean, look, we all have various problems across the globe, but with what the youth has been doing and the coming years and decades should be very optimistic as long as we keep working on them, with bringing in diverse ways of looking at things, with bringing in data-backed action through surveys, with looking at bringing in empathy and sort of, getting out there. The more the youth can participate through various measures that we talked about, I think while there are problems and we need to accept those, as long as we keep working on them, I think there are better years to come. So thank you everyone for being part of the panel. I wish I could keep on going with the questions, but I think we're at the end of time here. So having said that, we'll hand it over to Alice to take it from here, and please feel free to keep answering the questions you see on the Q&A and the chat. But that's all from me, and over to you, Alice.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a great start to the day with a meaningful and insightful conversation. I would like to thank our speakers who took the time to come in and share their experiences. I hope that our action groups were able to learn and by listening and realize that there's power in stories of young people, power in their voice, and most importantly, of their work. Whether it is through the work of Young India Fellow to bring in young Indians into decision making, or of the African Youth Survey led by the foundation that centers the voice, need, and aspiration of young people, or of the organization and inspiring trailblazers like Diane. I saw many comments while she shared her story that are leading by example, and everyone else who shared today. As shared at the beginning of the session, these insights are particularly valuable, and we embark this journey centered in human-centered design to build a 2100 roadmap. Your voice and feedback are important, and we want to hear from you all. Please take 10 minutes to share your vision and help us shape the future that includes young people's dream and ambition through our survey, being shared in the chat now. Please do share your thoughts and respond to the survey. We know many of you are enthusiastic about getting involved, and you already are part of the team if you have signed up for the engine room and join us. Our sports rates are a part of our action group. There are many opportunities for you to continue staying involved as action groups work towards building the 2100 roadmaps. Ensure you're recording your perspective through the youth survey. Several members from the Next Generation Fellows and our teams will be at the CSO conference in May in Kenya, and we would love to connect with all of you in person if you're also coming. As we continue on this journey of collaboratively building the 2100 agenda, join us for the next spotlight that will build on insights gained from today to identify and understanding the key challenges that young people and young countries face. Happening on June 12, Spotlight 2 will focus on challenge mapping and will be followed by the second pit stop on July 1st on future proofing this SDG aligned with the high level political forum. So let's let's stay connected and be sure to follow our future agenda on page on social media for more insights, events, opportunities. And finally, as the conversation builds online, Epistro, a young illustrator from India, was transferring all of this knowledge into a spectacular art, and I'm calling on Epistro now to spotlight her work. Great. So, Claus, it's really been great having you all, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.